Welcome everyone in Nigeria and the rest of the world. I am Gimba Umar and this is State of the Nation. We begin with the economy. Unemployment 23.1%, underemployment 20.21%, youth unemployment and underemployment at 55%. That will be 55.4% closing the Q3 figures of the past year. Zakabala is an economist and a chartered accountant. He joins us in the studios. I want to thank you so much indeed for coming on State of the Nation at this time. But what do you make of these figures? Tell us in terms of where to concentrate in getting better job figures in 2019, because this seems to be the hallmark if this administration should be counted as one that is impacting on the people.
Well, you're talking about 2019. That will just explain to you why we saw the escalation, of insecurity across the country. Because, yeah, it's good to have youths, coming up. That means brighter future for the nation. But if you are having high degree of unemployment, then it also says something about a bleak future for the youth. And once the future looks bleak, the next thing is that they will become vulnerable tools for all kinds of crimes. And when you talk about crimes, you will see economic crimes, political crime, social crime, sectarian crimes. So those are the things we're seeing. The hostility on the youth is so much in terms of the economic pains. The burden is so much. So in 2019, the only way is to see how we can cushion the pains on the youth. And that has to do, now we are in a political year. Whatever the new emerging leaders can do to cushion the pains and make sure our youth are gainfully employed will be highly appreciated by everybody.
Currently, the population growth rate far exceeds the GDP growth rate. That is what we have, which then means that poverty levels may likely be increasing from the current over 18 million people living below poverty lines. Is this likely to continue?
Well, we hope not. But from the way the thing is going, from the trend, I mean, you don't need any other statistician to tell you that poverty will continue to increase. Because the worst thing that will happen...
This is despite any government who eventually comes in 2019.
Regardless. In fact, even regardless of how you play around with statistics. Because, like we said, we will prefer to play with mathematics. Because mathematics is 1 + 1 will give you 2. But in statistics, 1 + 1 will give you X plus an error margin. But regardless of how you play around with these figures, the only way is to make sure you reverse it. Once population is growing more than GDP, you don't need anybody to tell you that you are in trouble as a country. We hope we can reverse it. It is possible. We have everything it takes within Nigeria to reverse it. All we need are simple leaders who are politically minded, who think generationally, and are good economic managers.
Okay, this is the point that we are at now, with some submissions coming from the International Monetary Fund, the IMF. It has cut the growth projections made to Nigeria to about 1.9% from 2.1%, saying that the country's economy is doing poorly. In effect, blaming Nigeria, South Africa, and indeed Angola as the biggest economies on the African continent for slow-paced growth. Oil prices is in the heart of this. How do we look at raising the bars and diversifying, since the monolithic nature of the country may not allow for these poverty levels to be taken down?
There's nothing wrong about being a monoproduct economy. But if you can manage your economy very well, then you will be doing fine. The United Arab Emirates was once a monoproduct economy. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia was once and is still a monoproduct economy. The difference is just in the diversification. Even Qatar, that we are talking, that just pulled out of OPEC, is basically a monoproduct economy. That economy is based on fossil fuel. It's either they are doing well on crude oil or they are doing well on gas, in this case, condensates. So being a monolithic or a monoproduct economy is not the key. I mean, it's not the problem. But what do you deploy the revenues you get from that product into? That's what makes the difference. To what extent are you developing your hospitals? To what extent are you developing education? To what extent are you trying to do something about manufacturing? If you're not doing anything about these sectors, then you will continue to suffer. And in the context of Nigeria, I mean, it's very clear. The many sectors are suffering. You don't have energy, right? And as you talk today, crime rate is going high. You are experiencing insurgents and hostilities.
Let me focus on that point where you talked about Qatar pulling out of the OPEC cartel. But is there anything wrong? Can't other OPEC members, do you foresee in 2019, say, another OPEC member, say Nigeria, for instance, who is grappling with producing 2.3 million barrels per day production for oil? And part of that is also part of the condensate that we hope to also have to make up for the that would be 2.3 million barrels.
Yes.
Is there anything wrong in Nigeria pulling out of the OPEC cartel as well and concentrate on condensate?
No. So in the context of Nigeria, so many things will be wrong. There is no way you can compare a country like Qatar with Nigeria, because when you talk about LNG, Qatar is probably the biggest country when you talk about LNG. And there is another cartel that is as strong and as equivalent as OPEC in fossil fuel. You know, OPEC has to do with, we basically refer to it as Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. Then when you talk about gas, the Gas Exporting Countries Forum has its headquarters in Doha, and that's Qatar. So Qatar is a very strong gas nation. And you know, when we were talking about these condensates, like I said, this is the best way to explain condensate. Condensate is like a species of natural gas that once the temperature comes down below a particular level, that gas or that natural gas will condense or shrink and become oil. And that was what we said will help us. Because from even the 2.3 million barrels that we say we're going to produce, and now OPEC cut us to about 1.68. From the condensate alone, we can get close to 620,000 barrels of condensates, and that will help us. All this will bring money to Nigeria. Revenue generation is not the issue from oil and gas. It's the management in Nigeria that has been our problem.
Because they need to finance the budget, really, the 2019 budget, and this will perhaps be an area to look at. Is that what you're saying?
Look, you see, every day we keep pointing to ourselves that Nigeria is rich in mineral resources. You see, we were talking before about crude oil. Then we started talking about natural gas. Now we've started talking about condensates. So if a country like Qatar will concentrate only on condensates to do well, and Nigeria has the conventional natural gas, the crude oil, and now even the condensates that can take care of that differential and still make us produce at 2.3 million barrels per day. Do you need anybody to tell you that Nigeria has what it takes to generate revenues?
But do we have the structure, though?
We have the structures.
In the NNPC?
No, you see, one thing we get completely wrong most of the time is when we talk about NNPC, we think it's an individual. When you talk NNPC, forget about the managing director, forget about the general managers, talk Nigeria. If Nigerian government is organized and focused, then NNPC will be organized and focused. A simple example is this. As far back as 2010, I remember when we had a world forum, you know, called Offshore Technology Conference. The then Minister for Petroleum said the petroleum industry bill was going to be passed in September 2010. Now a given political dispensation is almost reaching the end of its political life. We decided to break down the petroleum industry bill into 4 parts. And now this political dispensation has spent probably more than 75% of its political life and has not been able to pass one of these bill into law because the petroleum industry governance bill has not been assented to. So you spend 4 out of 4 years of your life as a government or a political dispensation, right? You could not pass 25% of a bill.
Do you support,
what does that say?
Do you support the privatization of the NNPC?
Look, as far as I am concerned, one of the worst things we are going to do as a government, because to me, when I talk about our government. There is no way you can say, as a government, all you know how to do is only to manage revenues that comes into a country or manage political activities, and you cannot manage an economy. Petrobras is there. There are so many. Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Saudi Aramco is government-owned. And if Saudi Aramco is doing well, if Petrobras is doing well, if others are doing well, and we are not doing well in the context of Nigeria, please remove it from the individual engineers you see, the accountants, the economists you see in those companies. Face the Nigerian government. A lot of our political leaders, to be fair to them, I will be straight and fair to them, they are not good economic managers. And you can be a good economic manager without necessarily being a political leader. But if you must be a political leader, some good knowledge of economic management is necessary. If not, you will throw everything off the table and your country will be in a mess the way some countries have been. And we pray that Nigeria doesn't get to that extent.
That'll be a good place to let it rest. Zakabala is an economist and a chartered accountant as well. Thank you. Always a pleasure to have your views with us here on State of the Nation.